Hello, fellow Martian movers. Welcome. I'm Claire Moon. You may know me from such places as the internet, from Instagram or Facebook. It's me. I really do want to sincerely welcome you to this program. I'm so excited to be here working with Marina Mars on something that I have struggled a lot with, and I would love to share all of my hard-fought lessons with you so you don't have to go through hard lessons. Hopefully, that's the goal. So we're going to talk about rest today. There are a few objectives that I would love for you to walk away from with this. And the first one is just that we define what rest is. We look at our relationship with rest, and then we decide what rest we need, and we figure out how we're going to actually do it. So those are our 4 objectives for today. If you walk away with any one of those, great. If you ever have any questions, by the way, at any point during this, feel free to go pause it and DM me, and I will try to get back to you. I am available to you guys on Facebook, Instagram, etc. I'm open to y'all. I usually wouldn't say that, but we're in a program together and I'm creating content. And so if you have any questions about it, I want you to ask me. Definitely. Don't be shy. But without further ado, let's talk about this shit. So the first thing I want to do is explain where I'm coming from with this. I think in the wellness industry in general, whenever we're talking about, self-care, whatever that means anymore, a lot of people are left out of the conversation. And I want to make sure that y'all know where I'm coming from so that this makes more sense in the context of my point of view and my perspective. And I also just want to make sure that who I am comes through so that, I don't know, I guess just so that it can be in context. So I am Claire Moon. That is a fake name because I'm a pharmacist and pharmacists can't hang. So I have a fake name. And I am a privileged, white, cis, queer lady. So that's pretty much where I'm coming from. I have a very financially stable life. I grew up poor, so I have a lot of student debt. But I am very financially stable. And why is any of that important? Why? It's because privilege makes it easier for you to rest, right? And so if we're going to talk about rest, before I even start, I feel like I have to responsibly acknowledge that that is not a reality for everybody. We're in a situation here in this current time where there are a lot of people who literally can't rest. People with multiple jobs, people with children, especially if they're small children. If your support network isn't as, robust as someone else's. And why I'm bringing that up too is because looking at where I would love to see people take this information and take this material is not that you go and spend 5 hours a week with your bath bombs and Netflix, although those are very valid forms of rest. Anyway, even if you can just take 2 or 3 minutes out of your week, that's the level that I think, some people are realistically at, which is totally fine. Take that time to rest. Even if it's you gotta lock yourself in your bathroom away from your children, do that for 2 minutes. And I really believe that that will make a difference for you. Otherwise, I would never tell you to do that. But the idea is just that I understand that there's a wide variety of people out there in a wide variety of situations, not all of which allow us to rest. It is what it is. It is very sad, and it is our state of affairs. So I just want to hear and see those people, and I see you. I want you to rest as well, and rest is going to look different for everyone. At the end of this workshop, it's basically a workshop, we're going to go through some exercises, and I guarantee that whatever you decide on rest, however you decide to fit it into your life a little bit more than you are now, it's going to look different than the person next to you, and that's okay. And also, your needs are going to change as well. So over the years, you're going to maybe revisit this, hopefully, and see that what you need is different. Like your needs are going to change over time. So I just want to honor all of that. I want to honor the wide variety of experiences out there, the wide variety of circumstances, and that I mean, as long as you can just like find 2 minutes, I think you can really improve the amount of rest in your life on a daily basis. And I really believe that makes a difference. And I think by the end of this, you'll see why I feel like it makes a difference. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. So obviously you're all here because you are like self-starting, self-motivated people. So I don't have to tell you how to do stuff necessarily. Marina's going to do that. We're going to talk about how not to do stuff. And the idea of not doing stuff, there's like whole books about not doing stuff. And I thought that I would kick this off by reading a poem from one of those books. All right, cool. So this is the Tao Te Ching, and it is, I'm not like necessarily a super spiritual person, but I like ancient philosophy, so I'm reading this right now. And it has a poem in here. This is all about how to do less, basically. It was written by a series of poems written by a man named Lao Tzu, who was alive about 2,000 years ago in what is now China. And so this is a translation. It's one that I feel is a responsible translation. So this one particular is by Ursula K. Le Guin, who worked with some scholars on the matter. But anyway, there's a very beautiful poem in here called The Uses of Not. So, 30 spokes meet in the hub. Where the wheel isn't is where it's useful. Hollowed out, clay makes a pot. Where the pot is not is where it is useful. Cut doors and windows to make a room. Where the room isn't is where there's room for you. So the profit in what is in the use of what isn't. So what we get out of shit is what we're not doing. And not doing shit makes you get more stuff sometimes. And sometimes that stuff is just emotional well-being. So there it is. I'm going to come back to that book and that poem a little bit later with a modern example of it. But for now, I just wanted to leave you with that. This idea that rest has a purpose. I think a lot of times we look at rest and it's just something to check off of the to-do list. We intellectually know that we should do this because you have to. We can definitely all agree that rest is in the same category as eating, sleeping, whatever you do. That's like a need for your body and mind and heart. Yet we don't do it. We don't do any of it. And I shouldn't, make such generalities, but I think in this day and age, we find ourselves just really going ham all the time, really just giving our all to so much. And the expectations for humanity have never been higher. The expectations for what we're supposed to accomplish in a day, a week, a month, a year has never been higher. I guess I can't speak for all of human history, but I feel like it's very high right now. So why? Why don't we do this, And apologies because I swear like a lot and I'm going to try to keep it to a minimum, but it's going to happen. So if that offends you, I'm sorry, but it's going to happen. So why is this so hard? Like, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to look at our attitudes and our relationship with rest. Because I think that therein lies the crux of why sometimes in different seasons of our life, it's hard to achieve. But anyway, it's purposeful. We don't have to imbue rest with purpose. It already has it. I think a lot of times we try to multitask and so an example that I have is I might try to take a bath to relax. And then what always pops into my head is, well, we could write while we're in the bathtub. Wow, that sounds amazing. You know what? No, that is not, I do this to myself all the time. That is not what we're doing. We're resting. We're committing to it. That is its own activity. It's kind of an oxymoron, rest activity, but I'm going to go with that a lot. That is a thing in and of itself. Put it on your calendar, make it its own thing. That's what we're going to do. And not feel guilty about it, because that's also what we're going to do today. And one other little caveat that I want to make. So rest has a purpose. It is something where, like, if you're building a wall, it's like the grout in between the bricks. You walk away from a problem that's been hounding you for weeks, and you come back after a week with a fresh pair of eyes and you solve that shit right away, right? That's what rest does for us. You know, if you're a weightlifter or you do like any kind of really intense physical activity, you might notice like that week or two that you took off because of an injury or a vacation, and you're like lamenting to yourself, like, oh no, I'm going to lose all of my abilities, because that's what we do. And then you come back and you do this trick that you haven't been able to do for like ever, or ever before. And it's because you let your muscles rest, you know? So that's where the purpose lies. But anyway, like, I just want to make one more caveat with the differences between people. So I kind of just touched on very briefly the different circumstances of folks and what rest is going to look like differently for each of us. It also has to do with personality a little bit as well. There are some people whose kind of baseline state of activity is higher than other people's. And that's okay. There's no right or wrong way to be. There's no right or wrong way to do this. But it comes back to the fact that someone else's rest is going to look different than yours. And I'll come to comparison in a moment, but some people have to kind of be busybodies to be at their best, and that's okay. But I think most of us can still insert a little bit more rest than we're doing, and it can be to our great advantage. So just give space too for your own personality and your level of what you need versus what someone else might need, right? So sorry, I have a template here that I'm following because it's a lot of material, so bear with me. Yeah, so this is a polarity too. I wanted to touch on that as well. Anytime you have a balance, because this is really about bringing more balance into our life with activity versus inactivity. And anytime there's a polarity that you're balancing, it takes continual attention and focus to keep that balance there. I mean, any kind of teeter-totter that you've ever seen, it doesn't just hang out in the middle. It's either going like this or like this. And it takes a lot of effort to keep it flat. So definitely, you know, if you let this go, that's okay too. Another 9,000 foot level view for a minute, because I know that we do these kind of programs and then we get no feedback later and we're like, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know if I am, you know, executing this plan correctly. And in my eyes, this is a practice. This is not, there's no destination. There's no final endpoint. There's no point at which you say, wow, I've made it. I'm completely balanced. Everything's amazing. That is not the case. It's a lifetime practice. Sorry to break it to you. And it's something too, it's almost like a meditation in and of itself, where you keep getting lost and you come back to it, and you keep getting distracted and you come back to it. You just keep coming back to it. You may be like super great at resting for like a few months and then completely forget about it for like 4 months because life or your kids or whatever. It's okay. You know, and then you remember, oh, I was supposed to like rest regularly. Shoot. Just go back to it. No big deal. And just do that forever. That's my, not lofty at all, right? It is and it isn't. So this is a long-term game. There is the fire path and there's the water path. And the fire path, it gets shit done immediately. The water path, it gets shit done more permanently, but much slower. Like carving out the Grand Canyon, you know, that's what we're doing. And that, I mean, I think that's actually a really good analogy, because it's a lot of, you know, it's a lot of time and ironically effort to get rest into your life in the way that it needs to be. At least there's effort at the beginning when you're kind of getting into it. So why don't we rest? Well, one of the biggest reasons, I have two. So the first big reason that I have is self-worth issues. And what I mean by that is we tend to entangle our self-worth, our identity, into our productivity. And that's a problem, because as soon as we stop being productive, as soon as we stop creating content or material, or at work, not doing, doing amazing at your job or whatever, as soon as those things happen, if your self-worth is tangled up with that, your self-worth also tanks along with whatever you're like not doing that you feel like you should be doing. We should ourselves so much. Beware of the should. Don't should yourself so much. Coming from someone who is like, I'm like one big walking should. It's a problem. But like, we can't do that because all of those things go away. All of those achievements, all of those experiences, all of those things that are so important to our identity at the face of things on paper, when you really get down to it, that's not it. You are not your achievements. You are not your accomplishments. You are not your sacrifice, your service, your outcomes. None of that is you. Like, when I say you that needs to rest, I'm talking about the you that is behind the thinking part, behind the feeling part, almost behind your heart. That person behind all of it, that is who I'm talking about. And when you untangle that from work and from productivity and toil, you're going to feel a lot better. And that's another thing that's a practice, and it's not a destination usually for most of us. Especially in this day and age, it's very individualistic. If you were raised in the Midwest like I was, that is literally everything. Your ability to work and produce and be a productive member of society, again, whatever that means anymore, like, it's all fake in a way. It is all just like, it's external to who we really, really are. And that gets to be a hard chestnut for some folks because, like, I have two brothers. They're both parents. I am not a parent, but I just really keep thinking, because both of my brothers have really small children. And so I'm always looking at their lives and their partners and like, oh my God, your life, like, it is so busy. And to tell those people, like, let's say I tell my brothers, when you're looking at the real you, it's not that you're a dad. Like, they would be like, whatever, that's all that I am, is a dad. I'm like, yeah, it is, but you weren't always that. Who have you always been, even before that? That's who we're looking at. That person needs rest. So why don't we do it? We do it because we compare ourselves. So when I mention that our rest doesn't look like anyone else's, we also compare our productivity. And everything online is obviously illusory. It is curated. It is highly, highly curated. So it's all fake, basically. Even like I can say that about my stuff. If you go onto Instagram, like, that's not, that's like 10% of who I am, you know? So just, we compare ourselves to those images, and we're like, oh my God, I have so much to do, right? Like, this other person must not be they must not be resting at all, because to be that perfect and that amazing and have that many skills, they must be working very hard. So I need to work very hard. So that's kind of one of the first things that happens. Another thing that can happen is that, like, let's say you kind of like weren't feeling well today, you slacked off a little bit, and you're like, oh my God, I have not done enough today. I can't rest because I have to make up for the fact that I wasn't productive earlier today. That's another excuse that we make. And then one of the big ones is fear of letting other people down. Especially if you're a caregiver, this is a big one, whether it's children, parents, friends, whoever. There's a lot of caregiver situations out there. It's like that sense of guilt that I hear people tell me about it, friends, relatives, that they feel guilty taking a moment for themselves because they really do love that other person. And I know that y'all know this, that you got to put your own oxygen mask on first. Like, that's super obvious. I didn't come here to say that. Everyone knows that. But there's also the kind of letting other people down where it's like, if I don't get to this text right away, that other person is going to be upset with me, or they, perhaps won't like me anymore, won't think that I care about them. Especially if you're someone who is recovering from codependency, abandonment issues, that this can be a hard one, because there's an instant gratification that happens when you respond to that text right away, when you are dependable, when you are all of these things to someone. It feels really, really good. And when you make someone else happy, it makes you happy, which is great to a point, until it gets toxic, until it gets codependent. And I am no therapist. I am no mental health professional. I am a pharmacist by trade. So despite me knowing a lot about mental illness, I do not know about therapy or psychology or any of that shit outside of what I've had myself. So I'm not going to get too much into those terms. Go get help with it yourself from a professional. But definitely letting others down and letting that fear drive your action and your busyness, that gets to be a slippery slope. So take a look at your motivation for why you are doing so much. Because part of this isn't rest. Part of this talk is like, where do I make time for it? And part of making time for it is looking at all of your activities that you do in a day and being like, where can I trim this down a little bit? Where can I whittle this down to a manageable level? Because over a long period of time, we get to the second point, the second of two, what I'm calling logistical or forced overextension. And this doesn't have to do so much with like mental, emotional, like fear of missing out or fear of letting others down. This is more just like, I had 3 kids and I have a job. Can't negotiate with any of that, right? And so this is where we come back to the book. I think one of the best modern examples of this is the level to which we respond to texts and emails and the speed at which we do that. We are pretty much on call 24/7 to the world at this point. A lot of us are. If you have good boundaries, good, then this is not for you. If you are anything like me and you've struggled with boundaries over the years, for all of my last very projected points for your whole life, then this is gonna resonate. But the more you respond and the quicker you respond, the more you will have to answer to. This is very much the double-edged sword where if you're really good at something, you're going to be asked to do more of it. If you're super dependable for people, those people are going to depend on you even more. And I'm not saying to abandon people. I'm not saying to abandon things that you have to get done. I know we all have to care for people and do our taxes and all of these things. I'm not saying that you like stop adulting or whatever. But what I am saying is look for areas where you're overachieving unnecessarily and look at your motives and see if it still is needed, or if it aligns with your goals or aligns with anything anymore. Because I think we really just get into the habit of doing a lot of that. And the way to make this transition, so if you're micromanaging your texts and your emails and all of these things and responding immediately, I challenge you to talk to the people in your life and just say, hey, I have a lot going on. I'm finding that I'm a bit overextended, so this is nothing personal for anyone. And you could even send out like a group email or text or make like an announcement on Facebook like all of us do and just be like, I am not going to be responding for 24 to 48 hours after you message me. Expect that. If it's an emergency, call me. Done. And then you have to magically hold yourself to that. I know when I started doing this, I was still responding sooner than 24 hours, definitely, because like I couldn't just make that adjustment. Like most of our bodies and our minds just can't immediately make that boundary adjustment, but you work your way closer to it over time. And what I've found over doing this for the last year or so is that people aren't texting me as much. People aren't asking me for as much stuff. And guess what? All of those people are still my friends. They still love me. Maybe one or two people have kind of faded away, but like, what does that say? Like, what does that say that they were there for? Some people don't actually need you in particular. They just need somebody. And you need to decide if that someone's going to be you, because you have control over that 100% some of the time. Like I said, I know some of us are in situations where we can't necessarily just, do this, but in some places we can. So I highly recommend doing that. Maybe say after 8 p.m., 7 p.m., you shut her down and you commit yourself to rest after 8 p.m. every night. Maybe once the kids are in bed, one day a week, you take 5 minutes or 10 minutes for yourself, or however long, maybe a whole night to take for yourself, and not do anything productive. I don't know if I ever defined rest, actually, now that we're here. Rest, if I didn't define it before, it's non-productive activity. It's doing something or doing nothing that has no goal, no productivity involved. So this can be, sitting on the couch watching Netflix. This can be reading something that you really love. Usually I feel like cooking is very involved, but for some people it's like, that's their heart and soul stuff. So if that's cooking for you, go cook. Having a bath, going for a walk in nature, anything low key that's restorative for you, hanging out with friends. Some people are extroverts and they are, kind of lifted up by social activity. If you're not an extrovert and you're an introvert, you might need more alone time. What I would like to recommend, the one kind of hard and fast thing I would say is try to get some kind of stillness in there, some kind of silence if you can, even if it's just for a couple minutes every day, because that space is where the magic happens. And I will discuss that magic in a minute, but I kind of got off track a little bit here. Okay, there we are. Yes, another boundary. No more than for me, I had to get my social engagements down to 2 a week. Because I was just very overextended at one point in time. And this might mean that you're scheduling a coffee date with a friend 3 months from now. And that might sting for some of us, especially those of us who might worry that that friend might feel unimportant, being I have to pencil them in 3 months out from now. But this is what we're doing. And I swear it's worth it. And all the friends and all the family that need to be there are going to be there, even if you're taking time for yourself. Okay? So don't let fear guide you in any of this. You have to let love for yourself and your well-being guide you the most. And that is not going to turn you in any kind of wrong direction. And with that, and now that I've kind of gotten into rest and what it's defined as, which I should have defined at the beginning, but whatever. Now let's get into looking at who we are and what kind of rest is good for us. So, like I had kind of mentioned before, the real core, deep you. Who is behind the thinking part? Who is behind the heart? Who is behind there? When we start meditating, which I'm not going to really speak much to that, but meditation is on the menu for potential kinds of rest. I think it's really great. I highly recommend it. But you get into this place where you try to kind of see yourself feeling emotions. You see you're the observer. You're observing yourself having your life. That is you. That is you right there. And that might not make any sense to you right now, but if you give yourself some time and space, it might someday. So what I want you to do for this first exercise, and this is where I provided a worksheet. So if you want to just hop over onto that worksheet, I've got some words on there to explain it. You might want to pause this video for a few minutes while you jot some things down about yourself. But I want you to write 2 or 3 sentences about who you are, and not listing any of those things that I mentioned. Just you. And I gave an example of what that might look like. So for me personally, like right now, if I could describe myself, I would say, warm, wisdom seeking, friendly, light, exhausted, sad, a lot of different things. That is me in this moment, and that's okay. And that is me. Has nothing to do with anyone else. So take some time to do that, pause this video, and come back to me. And you're back. Amazing. Good job. Okay. And exercise 2 is going to be what kinds of rests are appropriate for you. So looking at 3 different categories of things. I want to separate out activity throughout our lives into 3 categories. One for mental, emotional, like head stuff, physical things, and then things that are more restful, that maybe fill your heart and soul a little bit, that kind of increase your life-o-meter. And those are some things that I might have mentioned before, like hanging out with friends, Netflix, meditation, whatever it is. So take all of the stuff that you do in a given day, year, week, put it down into these categories. So for instance, I am a pharmacist. That means that my job is very intellectual, it's very emotional, and those are the things that I expend a lot of my energy on during the day. So that goes in there. Physical. Sometimes I do pole dance or burlesque or yoga. All of those things are physical. I might put that down in physical. For spiritual things, heart things, I might take a bath, give myself a tarot reading, get a massage, anything like that. And then once you have kind of determined where all the things in your life fit into with these categories, look at the area you want more in. Which area is neglected the most? And that's going to look different for everyone. There might be 2. Maybe there's 2 areas of your life that you feel like you would like more rest activities within. And then that's going to help us focus more. So once you have that, definitely like for exercise 3, we're going to write down all of the things that we want to add. But for now, in exercise 2, let's just figure out the area of our life that is being neglected the most, I guess. And that's where we're going to put the most rest into. And then just keeping your own individualities kind of in mind. Individualities, I don't think that's a word, but I made it one. And then once you've paused and you've come back to me with that, this is the most fun part. This is where we figure out how we want to care for ourselves. So again, go to your worksheet. I've given some examples there, and write down the things that you really love to do that really fill up your heart and fill up your cup. Okay? Pause the video, come back to me. And then finally, with exercise 4, I want you to actually get your calendar out, and I want you to decide how long your rests will be. They can be a few minutes. You can just put like a reminder on your phone to beep at you like once a day and just say, take a few breaths. It can be that simple. Or you can carve out, however much time you want in your calendar, however much time you have. And then do those things, even write in your calendar, like at this time, I will do this. And it's not going to keep you accountable all the time. It depends on who you are. Some people, if it's in the calendar, they definitely do it. Sometimes it's just an encouragement or a reminder. And that's really what we're looking for here, is just to give future you some encouragement, some reminders. So with that is all of the mindfulness exercises, all of the mental things. Again, like I said, the idea with this is that it really is a practice, and we're just trying to make more room for ourselves and more space. And what I'm really looking for in an ideal outcome for myself is clarity. That is the magic word here, because when you make space for yourself, when you make space to think Oh my God, to just process stuff that's happened throughout the day. When you give yourself, especially stillness or silence, which usually a lot of new agey people would be like, oh, let's put meditation in there. Let's definitely do meditation. I don't think that's necessary. I think just giving yourself space and some peace, even if it's for 5 to 10 minutes, if you do that long enough, you will find some more clarity. What I've personally noticed and what people I've talked to have noticed is that when you give yourself that space, you start to like actually think about yourself, think about your life, think about your relationships, and you start to see things that don't really align anymore. Or you see things that you're like, yeah, I'm really happy I'm doing that. I want more of that. And I think when we're constantly rushing, we're constantly going, we never have a chance to take inventory or analyze or even think for a minute like, does any of this part of my life need updating or spring cleaning, you know? So I'm really hoping that, with some added space, with some added clarity, with some added rest, you will also get more solidification and fortification of your direction in life. When you have more peace, like I said, you can figure out what you really want more of, that you really love. Maybe you let go of something and you're not sure if you should have let it go. Give yourself some space and time to get some clarity on that, and you might discover like, oh yeah, no, that was the right choice. And having that moment, like giving yourself that moment of like, oh yeah, yeah, that was okay. Or, oh yeah, I actually really do love that. I should do more of that. It is just so, I personally feel like it really bolsters my self-esteem because it helps me feel more confident on my path. Like, I'm gonna do this shit. I'm gonna do that shit. I'm not gonna do that shit. And like, you sit down for a minute and you really consider it and you're thoughtful about it and it becomes integrated. And that's some clarity. That is what we are looking for. I feel like it's kind of like a flower that like opens, and until you give yourself space or time, that flower of like how the fuck you feel about yourself or about your world or your direction or where you're going or all of these things that we desperately need clarity on and we want clarity on. It's like all hidden in this little flower that unless you give it space or time, it's never going to open. But if you give it space or time, it's going to open and you're going to discover all this stuff in here about yourself. So that is the reason why part of my bonus content, the woo-woo part that I'm going to get to, that's why I have included a method for handling difficult emotions. And please look at that. It's called the RAIN method. It's RAIN. It was originally, what was her name? Michelle Peterson? Michelle something. I wrote it in the worksheet. But then Tara Brach took her method. Tara Brach, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right. She's amazing. I cited her as well. Definitely look up her stuff. But anyway, she came up with this, or, kind of recombobulated it into something that was a little more helpful. And it really walks you through that method. It walks you through how to process emotions that are challenging, because I don't want to leave y'all high and dry telling you to make all this space for yourself, telling you to like, get all of this time to think about your life. And if we're being real, there's some dark stuff in there. There's some shadow work that's going to happen when you give yourself the time to do it consistently. And shadow work, it pretty much just means going inside of yourself and like dealing with problematic stuff, whether it be codependency is a good example because a lot of us have that. Now a lot of us are thinking about unpacking a lot of our racial biases, a lot of shadow work to happen, and it is difficult sometimes, And so I don't want to like lead you into this cave of yourself and then like leave you without a flashlight. So the RAIN method is a really, really great flashlight when you're kind of in the darkness of your own cave and you're kind of exploring yourself for the first time in a few years, because it happens a lot that people just don't take time to see themselves. And when you do, there's a lot to see. So I'm going to close with one of my favorite things that I've ever been told by anyone. And it's from my friend Alma. I don't know if it's her quote or if she heard it somewhere else, but I was talking about FOMO, fear of missing out. And like, we're online, you can see everything people are doing all the time. And you're like, I should do that stuff. Why am I not doing that stuff? And you feel guilty for not, participating in everything. And she said, stop worrying about what you are missing on the outside. Start worrying about what you're missing on the inside. What is going on in here that you are also missing out on? And I was like, okay, I get it. Because, really, there's financial debt. There's also emotional debt. There's spiritual debt. There's all kinds of debt. And as much as we want to keep striving for these external achievements, as much as we want to, as much as some of us have to, we're forced into these positions. There are people who don't have the choice of, um, chasing finances to survive. A lot of us go into a spiritual or emotional debt, and that is really something to consider. So, like I said, I do want to say, though, that there are victims of oppression who just don't have the privilege of resting. And again, if that is you at any time in your life, if it's right now, you know what? If you can just take 2 minutes to just be still, even if it's like in the middle of your shift at work. I do that a lot at work, actually. I have a little alarm on my phone that goes off and it tells me, take a few breaths. Because when I say like 2 minutes once a day, I can't even hold myself to that right now. But anyway, no matter what position you're in, there's something you can do. And that is awesome. And you should feel awesome about that. You don't have to make this a super extravagant practice to feel good about it. If you just take like that little moment for yourself, feel awesome about that, because that's really hard to do. That's really hard to do sometimes. So I hope this was helpful. I hope that this inspires you to take some time for yourself. I know it's really difficult, and sometimes it takes a while to carve it in. Sometimes it can take months, but I really hope that you will pursue this. And please do not hesitate to reach out to me with questions. I'd be happy to answer them. Hello, Martian movers! Welcome to the movement portion. I would love to talk to you today about how to incorporate rest into your movement, into your choreography, into your dance. This can be casual, this can be professional. I have both of those. So, first things first, I'm gonna do the casual first, and then I'm gonna move to more of like if you're an actual like performance artist, entertainer kind of situation. If you are an entertainer, some of this might be kind of repeat knowledge that you already know, so bear with me. But if we are casual, let's say I'm at a wedding, and let's say that I see a woman who is very gorgeous checking me out, and I want to say hello to her. But I'm at a wedding, and I am tearing it up on the dance floor, and I am busting moves left and right, and I don't want to be sweaty and gross. And also, I am a tired individual, and I can't dance for 3 hours at a wedding. What do I do? What do I do? I have exactly what you should do. So first things first, the song that I chose to work with for this, just to give you an example, if you want to look up the song Don't Rush by Young T, I think it's Young T and Little Bugsy or something? I'm not sure. But it's an amazing song, and I use that because it's got a really nice beat to it. And what we do is we look for the really fast beat that happens, and usually that's the most forward one, and we tend in general to pick that beat, the really fast one. And so what this kind of looks like let's say we're casually dancing. I'm dancing casually. I'm at the club. I'm at a birthday. I'm at a wedding. I'm somewhere where the dance floor needs me on it the whole night, right? That's what we do here. So we're dancing, and we are moving our hips to every single beat. Oh my God. And what I am proposing to you, and you can try with the Don't Rush song, it works really well, You can, instead of going every single beat, you can go every single beat. So every single beat, that's the fast one. That's, if we do that for 3 hours, that is unsustainable. But if we take the slow beat, or, because sometimes there's a fast beat and a slow beat, or there's like two completely different beats that are different rhythms, you can pick any of those. You don't have to just go with the most forward rhythm or beat in a song. You can pick a slower one or a different one that suits you. That's totally allowed. And what you'll find is that it still looks good. That's the best part about this. So when we pick every other beat to move, to do our movement, it's way more sustainable. So try that out. If that doesn't make sense, hit me up in the DMs. But where that comes in very handy, it's not just that scenario where I'm trying to not be sweaty to impress someone that I like by not smelling bad. It is also, if you're a go-go dancer, saved my life the whole time I was, doing that a lot, because you're dancing for 4 hours straight with a couple breaks. So pace, this is another pace yourself situation. So that's kind of like the casual / go-go way to add a little less activity. So it's not exactly rest, but it's less intensity of doing a movement every other, going slow. And you'll find too that like even songs that are pretty quick beat, like we're looking at like, maybe over 120 beats per minute or something, that gets to be pretty fast. It looks good if you're still moving kind of slow to it, and it's counterintuitive, but trust me, it looks all right. And then for the rest, so let's say we're on stage, we are working on choreography, we're working on whatever that we are presenting to an audience. The idea of the dramatic pause, and I think we all kind of know what that is. We all know what that does. It certainly gets people's attention. And I think that's partly because people are so used to seeing someone move on a stage that when they stop moving, it actually almost grabs our attention more than some of the most impressive shapes or impressive movements. Standing still tends to actually get a little more attention sometimes. And that's stage presence, really. So, some people will go on a stage and they'll take up every single foot of it. And that's what we are really going for. We don't want to be small. However, I understand that, especially when I was starting to do burlesque, the idea of stopping moving and just standing there was the most terrifying thing that you could ever ask me to do. I think it's pretty natural when you are on stage. It's like, just keep it moving. Just keep it moving. We're going left, we're going right, we're going front, we're going back, we're going everywhere. We're doing all kinds of movement. And then you don't have to worry too much about interacting with your audience, which is the most horrifying, terrifying part of the entire affair. So what I am going to talk about now is how to do those dramatic pauses and still do some stuff when you're there, where we're giving our body rest, we are committing to stage presence, we are asserting our dominance and taking up space, and we're doing all of that while doing not very much. And that is the idea. So let's say that I am doing a burlesque routine, or anything really. This could be, you could be a thespian, and this is probably, I can imagine that this would be helpful. Any kind of like dramatic thing where you're trying to tell a story or get people's attention. Let's say I'm doing the strut, being great on stage, and then I want to stop. So let's just take this. I'm like this. We're like this. We're like this. No, that looks good. Let's do this. So I'm, being very cute. And I'm being very pretty and very majestic and serious. So I'm not moving though. And this is the part where stuff gets scary. And what we can do in this position. So first of all, we're going to rest, because honestly, running around all over stage is exhausting. Especially if it's a fast number. And I should say that the parts of the music where you do this, I'm not going to get into. Musicality is a whole extra thing. but usually the bridge of a song, which is the part that comes after the couple verses and choruses, it's the weird part of a song that sounds different. That's a good spot for this, as well as the part of an EDM song right before the drop. That is another good part for these things that I'm about to describe. So we're in this shape, and it feels, ho-hum. What am I doing here? It's terrifying. First thing you can do, look at people slowly. So, I can just like sit here and look at people. And that's super, if you're in the audience and that's happening, that's exciting. Trust me. Don't forget about your face. That's a whole nother discussion that I'm not going to get into. But when you are in these rest situations, even if I'm on the pole, even if I'm on aerial, you can do this too. You can be up in the air in a shape and you can pause for just 2 seconds. 1,000, 2, 1,000, and then you're off and running again. But just that 2 seconds really is enough to like make that pause really dramatic, and it's just enough to maybe give yourself a chance to take one big breath. And that's what we're going for, because it makes a big difference. It sounds like that wouldn't be that helpful, but it is. It definitely is. If you're anything like me, you are very out of shape, and like dancing for 3 minutes straight, especially on stage, is very difficult. By minute 2, I need to go off stage and get my albuterol inhaler because I am about ready to die. So taking these rests is like, I rely heavily on them. So anyway, 1,000, 2, 1,000. You can look at people very slowly. You can add a wink if that is appropriate, because it's fun and people like that. So that's thing 1. Thing 2 that you can do while you're here is you can move a limb. It's not very hard. You're still resting. You can still be, and you can take a breath during that, but it makes it a little bit more interesting, where the fear and what is so scary about just sitting here and not doing anything on stage while everyone's looking at you. Well, I am doing something. I'm moving my arm and I'm doing this and I'm looking at everybody, and it's really great. So that's thing 2, right? And you can even, you can't see my leg very well, but you can do it with a leg too, and just make a very slow movement. So 2 other things left. Now, if you are not wanting to necessarily pick one static, stationary pose to be in, another thing that you can do that's a little bit more movement, but I consider it still in the range of a dramatic pause, because you're slowing down enough that people might notice, is, doing a whole, body show thing. And this is kind of still with limb movement, but now I'm actually touching myself, which is uncomfortable at first when you start doing it, and I totally want to recognize that. You can do that. You can, come down. I'm touching my leg right now for those of you who can't see my leg, which is everyone. And then slowly just developing through. So we're just developing through a shape, we're just developing through it. It takes up a lot of time. It gives us time to rest. It gives us just a time to catch our breath. And that's very important. So one last thing, just another thing to consider when you are on stage or just being amazing, not on stage, whatever, just to improve the quality of that time that you are stationary or static. So I think a really good example, which I'm not sure if you're going to be able to catch this on video because it's subtle, but trust me, it makes a huge difference. I have seen it as an audience member over the years of watching shows. I have seen it, in my own shows that I watch back. It's holding tension in your body and moving your limbs from your center. So the first concept of holding tension in your body, I could be like this and I feel I'm kind of floppy. I'm 100% relaxed right now. The only muscles I am engaging are those to stand in this position vaguely. I'm not like, this is not engaged. None of this is engaged. My shoulder is engaged because I'm holding my arm up. What I suggest is holding tension in your whole body, like engaging all of your muscles. And one way to do this to help, or one thing to do to help this, is to hold an emotion in your mind, whether that be that of a character that you're drawing from, or just the vibe of whatever you're doing. Focusing on that can help you to kind of imbue your movement with more spirit, I guess. So I'm here, I'm here. But then as soon as you engage, it kind of lifts you ever so slightly. So I'm here, and it's really subtle. So again, I don't know. I mean, my clothes are a little baggy. I don't know if you can see, but really holding tension in your body. So I can be like this and be fine. And, it is what it is. If the music is going and I've got a whole thing and, maybe I'm doing the look and I'm doing all this stuff. But if I engage my body and I hold tension, it has so much more to it. So all of a sudden, and I'm also giving face, but you can see, and my hands are holding on to that energy. Even if you're just moving your fingers a little bit during it, holding any kind of tension here is going to just bring really a lot more life to that static shape that you're holding during your rest, which this isn't, as you can see, we're actually doing quite a bit and during this stationary time. So I'm almost, don't want to call it rest, but you get my point. And then that final thing about moving your limbs from the center. So a lot of times when we reach out and grab something, it's very purposeful. We have to grab this thing and bring it to us. There's a purpose, there's a job. When we are, doing the whole reaching out in a theatrical sense, we don't need to just think with our hands. We're always thinking with our hands, or our feet. But really, we need to be thinking with our shoulders, our heart, our rib cage, our pelvis, if we're going to move our legs, and starting the movement from there. And it starts up here. So when I'm moving a limb, my brain is thinking about here. I'm focusing on this part of my body, not this part. And so if I do a simple reach, great. But what if I really add, what if I actually start with my shoulder and chest and bring that kind of, start there. And you can do it with your legs too, although I know you can't see my legs very much, but I can go like this, or I can really, it's not as easy with the legs, but you get the idea. So you're just really starting from your center, and it gives more life to your movement, even when you're not doing very much. So I hope that helps. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. But yeah, it's just purposely putting that stuff into your choreography. It's going to make you look better on stage. It's going to make you look more intentional, and it's going to give your body time to rest for just a moment while you take a deep breath and connect with your audience while you're also breathless and needing your inhaler. So thank you so much. Love y'all. Bye. And now, Martian movers, it is time for the woo-woo content. Whoop whoop! Bonus content. Let's do it. If you don't like this, if you're not into it, that is okay. I am not offended. This is going to be about astrology. So, I know it's a little out there. In fact, I know it's a lot out there. So no offense if you are not into astrology. You don't need to take any of this. But what I will say is on the woo-woo worksheet that I have provided you, I want you to scroll to the bottom and you will see the Rain Method by Tara Brach. And this method is a way that you can work through really difficult emotions. So check that out. That is very secular. It's not spiritual. It is not really anything. It is very much just like a psychological kind of method to work through emotions. And I'll just explain it really quickly. So before I get into the astrology part, because I had mentioned if you make a lot of space for yourself, you might end up dealing or running into some shadow stuff on the inside of yourself that you need to work through or that doesn't feel good. And I don't want to just leave you high and dry without something to deal with that with. So if you do feel an emotion, let's say I am feeling like very angry about something that happened at work where I felt stupid. Um, that sucks. So I'm going to recognize this emotion that I am angry, I'm embarrassed, I feel dumb, and you're going to allow that to just be. You're going to just be, because a lot of times we'll feel something and then we try to talk ourselves out of it. We're like, yeah, but you shouldn't feel dumb because of this. And like, why are you so angry? It's not that big of a deal. It's just your ego, all this stuff we say. It's okay. You ground yourself into love in the ground. You feel your feet on the ground and you allow yourself to feel that because it's okay. There's nothing wrong with feeling angry or stupid or embarrassed. So you just feel it. And then once you've let yourself feel it for a little while, then you're going to investigate and be like, why do I feel this way? Well, I feel this way because I'm angry because I feel stupid. And why do I feel angry when I feel stupid? Well, it's because it's scary to feel like people are judging you, right? If people think you're stupid, like you're going to feel like scared and embarrassed. Maybe they won't like me anymore. Maybe they're thinking this. Maybe they're thinking that. That's fear. So the anger is coming from a fear. Why am I scared of that? Well, I'm scared of rejection. I'm scared of people not liking me. I'm scared of people not thinking I am the best thing in the whole world. And why does that scare me? Well, it's because I love myself. I am awesome. Like, I am great. I just made one mistake, And I want people to see me for the true me, which is awesome. And that's why I'm scared they won't see that. So we got to the point now, we're through the R, we're through the A and the I, and we're like, okay, I guess I just really love myself, and that's why this is upsetting, and I'm scared of people's stories of me, which I shouldn't be, because you can't control other people's stories about you. And then you ask yourself what you need. Like, what do I need right now to feel better? Do I need to take a bath? Do I need to go for a walk? Do I need to put on makeup? Do I need to watch some Netflix, meditate? Like, whatever you need. Ask the child within. If you were a kid, what would you want right now to feel better? Do you need to forgive yourself? Do you need to give yourself a hug? Man, there's nothing wrong with that. Give yourself a goddamn hug. Give yourself what you need to feel better. And it works pretty much every time, and I feel a lot better afterwards. So we can usually bring a lot of negative emotions back to love, back to grounding in reality, back to a lot of stuff inside of us that we may not have been aware of was causing that anger or that sadness or that grief or fear or whatever it was. So please, use that method. Check out those websites that I listed of hers. They're really amazing. It talks a little bit more about the details, a little bit more about the method. And certainly get professional help from a therapist or a psychologist if you need it. I am not a trained in that field medical professional. I have a different medical profession, not that one. But I think it's a pretty straightforward method that's easy to use. Okay. Let's talk about astrology. Let's talk about woo and rest and you and how this all works. So before I get too far into how to use the sky as a means of deciding about rest, I'm going to give my litany of astrology caveats because there's a bunch of them. So the first one is that if you are new to astrology or maybe you're just kind of an enthusiast, there's a lot of enthusiasts right now, and I am enthusiastic about that. There's a lot of memes out there. There's a lot of what we call pop astrology, popular astrology. That's what we call it in the industry. And a lot of it is funny, and it's kind of fun to see a list of character traits and be like, it me. Oh, I'm a Virgo. Everyone likes to do that. It's fun. I think it's human nature to get joy out of, kind of characterizing those things in ourselves, especially if it's kind of comical. But be careful for a few reasons. So first of all, most of those memes are not accurate. Sometimes the people making them don't even know astrology, so just keep that in mind. I actually didn't know that till very recently. I was just at an astrology conference, and it was online. It was like 500 people at it, and I learned that a lot of the memes are made by people who are just doing it for the likes and the lols. So be careful. Don't take too much out of those. Okay. Another caveat, and these all kind of tie together, is that one single character trait, one singular behavior, or anything about a human, it's very rare that it can be described by just one thing in a chart, or one planet, or one sign. It's very uncommon. It can happen, but for the most part, when I'm actually looking at a chart and doing things with it, you can ask me a pretty simple question and I will look at, like, I'm not exaggerating, like 7 or 8 different things before I talk about it with you. Shit's complicated. It's really complicated. Like, I had no idea when I got into it how complicated it was. And that's why I stayed. So just know that it's so complex. So whatever you take from it, if you are not yourself like a student of astrology, don't make any decisions by it. Don't date by it. Don't use any of it to decide who's going to be your friend or not, or your date or not. It doesn't work like that. Okay. It's very complicated. And another final caveat is that when I'm talking about how we look at the sky and how we relate that to rest, what this is not about is about like a physical connection between the two things. So there's 2 different schools of thought about the mechanism of astrology and how it works, because we're like, this is all bullshit. How does this work? One of the ways is a common idea that there's a physical connection. There's something that happens up here that causes a physical thing to happen down here. And we might not know why, but there's like an actual causal relationship. Keyword cause. The other school of thought, this hand, not this one, is that it is like a sign. It's like a clock or a mirror. So if it's Minnesota in December and I look outside at 9 p.m., it's dark out. The thing is if I just look at the clock and it says 9 p.m., I don't even have to look outside. I know it's dark out. And so it's kind of like if I look at the chart or some astrology stuff and it's telling me something, that doesn't mean that the astrology stuff made the thing happen. It's just telling me that it's going on, much like a clock, much like a mirror or a reflection. And that's how I look at it. And that was actually how astrology started 2,000 years ago. People looked at it as a sign. It wasn't until later when socio-political pressure created this other movement in astrology to keep it from becoming illegal or punishable by death. And they made it into a science to kind of pass. So, like I said, this is all way more complicated than anyone realizes, but I just want to make that clear because I think a lot of people get nervous about astrology, especially if they're new to it. They're like, what about retrogrades? What is going to happen? And it need not be such a situation. Because not everything in astrology, not everything in your chart, not every planet, not every sign is important to you at all times. There's cycles, there's transits. Not everything is relevant to you at all times. That's just how it works. That's how it works. So basically, with a retrograde or with the moon, we can use those signs to help guide our activity. So you've got as above, so below, right? The rest of that sentence that no one knows about is as below, so above. It's a 2-way thing. It's a reflection. So we can just align ourselves with the reflection of the sky to try to make life a little easier, give it a little more structure. Because people love structure, right? We don't always know it, but we like structure. So I'm going to talk about 4 things. 2 of them you can take with you right now and start using them. The last 2 are a little more advanced. They're for people who are a little more into astrology or for people who have a professional astrologer where they can ask them about these things and find out for themselves. But I'm kind of more making you aware that it exists more than explaining it because there's not time. So the first thing are lunar cycles. The moon, right? We see the moon. It's the most obvious thing in the sky besides the sun most of the time. And there's this idea that with menstruation, with people who menstruate, that you can kind of sync those two up, line them up. We can't always make our bodies do the same thing as the moon, right? But we can still take the ideas and use them elsewhere. So the big premise with this is that a new moon, where there's no light from the moon, that's a very quiet time. It's a time for rest. It's a time for intention setting, for kind of regrouping from the month and deciding what we're going to do or what we're going to focus on or prioritize for the next month. And the full moon is peak activity. It's peak brightness. And that's when we're going to do the most stuff. That's when we're going to present things and be very public. We're going to also have things end or culminate that we've been working on through the whole waxing part of the lunar cycle. And those two polarities help kind of govern how much activity we do. So even though, as much as we want to sync up our body with the moon, I know I've tried and it doesn't work because that's not how any of that works. We can still line up our activity with our menstruation, right? So it's the same idea. During menstruation, it's the least energy most of us have for folks that do have to go through that. And similarly, just plan to do less. Put most of your rest at that part of your cycle. And then during ovulation, granted, some of us don't ovulate, but we still have our period or whatever. That's where the most activity happens because usually we have a little bit more energy. We have a little bit more get up and go. And then throughout the waxing part of the cycle, where the moon is becoming brighter and brighter and brighter, we're doing more and more activity. We're getting to peak activity. And then we're coming down, the moon is waning, and our activity is kind of decreasing along with it. So we're basically lining up our activity level with the amount of light with the moon. That's something that you can do. And you can also apply that to, you can do whatever with those kind of three things, lining them up however you want, however you are able. But it's really nice. And that is not an idea of mine. This is kind of a basic idea that I see in all kinds of new agey, even pagan folks I know are kind of really into that. So again, it's not my idea, but it is broadly a theory or kind of a way of being that is shared in these communities. So that's thing number one that you can do. Rest more during your period, rest more during new moons. They may or may not align. Do more during the middle part of your cycle when you have more energy. Makes sense, right? Second thing, retrogrades. Whoa. Okay, so a little retrograde 101. Bigger planets like Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, they are retrograde half of every year. They're retrograde so much because they move so slowly. So those individually, we don't really feel those as much. We usually see that they kind of reflect more what's happening in society at large or larger groups of people. The smaller planets like Mercury, Venus, Mars, those are the ones that we want to pay attention to. And they each have their own little flavor, but they each hold something that we can consider when we're planning out rest. So with Mercury retrograde, basically, again, not always important for everyone all the time. It depends on what's going on in your birth chart. It depends on how old you are and what year of life you're in. And there's a bunch of timing techniques around it, but essentially not every Mercury retrograde is going to matter for you. It's just not. That's how it works. But what we can all start doing today is there's 3 of those a year. They're each 3 weeks long. Plan to have more time in your transitions. So if you are planning to get your hair cut after work, put an hour in between there instead of the 20 minutes that you were planning. If you have, just don't schedule back to back to back stuff. Put more space in there because you're going to have then more time for logistical or emotional damage control that is needed at those times. And you are going to thank me later. And if you don't need those times to do damage control of some kind. Use it for rest activities. Okay, so that's Mercury retrograde. So for Venus retrograde, it's a little bit different. It's not so much giving more time for transition or more time for damage control as much as it is just straight up giving more time for leisure, joy, rest, and peace, and connecting with others that you love in peace. Because that is harder to find during a Venus retrograde. And basically, any of that like heart soul stuff that you found worked for you to restore you, any kind of like hanging out with really like trusted close friends, pencil all of that in, make more time for those things to, kind of make up for the lack thereof during a Venus retrograde. And then finally, we have Mars retrograde, which is actually very relevant to right now if you are doing this program. And right now I'm recording this, and it is, what month is it? It's June of 2020. And we have a Mars retrograde coming this fall. It actually goes into Aries in July, and come like September-ish, it's going to go retrograde. And what that means for Mars is that, especially in Aries, it's very get up and go. It's very active. It is very driven. So much ambition, so much effort, so much energy. And this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And the biggest risk is burning yourself out. So just really making sure to schedule rest in for the purpose of trying to delay or avoid burnout. Yes, that's all I got there. So those are some very straightforward ways that you can incorporate this into your daily life right now. You don't have to pay a dime. Just put stuff in your calendar and remind yourself to do things at certain times of the year. This is very much like weather. If it's going to rain out, we know to bring our umbrella today, And if this stuff is going to happen with astrology, we know to plan accordingly because, we can never tell exactly what's going to happen. Of course, no one can tell the future, not even me, as much as I'd like to think I can. But what we can tell is that certain periods of time have certain qualities that we can prepare for. The two things that are a little more advanced that I would like you to seek out professional work with if you so choose to explore it is how your natal chart figures into the amount of rest that you might need. With your birth chart, we've got the sun, we've got the moon, we've got your rising sign. Those are kind of the three most important ones that people know about. And depending on their location in your chart, what sign they're in, what house they're in, that can determine your level of vitality and the amount of rest that you might need. And so, for instance, if I've got a moon in Pisces and I've got my sun in Taurus, that's a lot of slow, kind of wayward, moving energy. There might be stamina with Taurus. There might be endurance, but it's not fast. And Pisces tends to need a little bit more rest. So if you've got like 2 or 3 things in your chart that say that you might need more rest, that might actually be a thing for you. Versus if you've got like your sun in Sagittarius and you've got your moon in Leo, those are like fire signs. They're super energetic. There's a lot of endurance and stamina with Leo, and you may be able to do a lot more on a lot less sleep than the last person I just talked about. So it depends on a lot of things in your chart. It depends on so many things. And that's why it's a little complicated. And that's why I don't want you to necessarily just look where your sun and moon is and make a bunch of determinations, because it's way more complicated than that sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. And you might be that sometimes. So just, keep that in mind. And then finally, there is this whole timing technique called progressions. And you can Google that if you would like. It's called progressions, like a progressed thing. And essentially, we just stretch out time. And so it takes the moon about 2.5 days to get through a sign. With progressions, it takes about 2.5 years for the moon to get through a sign. So we just stretch out that time frame. And what we can find there is, how I was mentioning with a new moon, you're going to do less activity. Or alternatively, during your menstruation, during your period, you are going to do less activity. Now, we can get a progressed version of that lasts for 2.5 years. So you might be that Sagittarius, Leo, like on fire person. but it might be a progressed new moon period of 2 years for you. And so you might find that you need a little more rest during that time. You might need to dial things down a notch or two during that time, just for temporary, for a little bit. So again, another complicated method, but if you're interested in asking someone about that, they can tell you a little bit more about how the sky and rest kind of fit in together with you personally. So yeah, that's all I really got for woo-woo stuff. Again, I mean, I'm sure like if you're new to astrology, none of that made sense. I can pretty much guarantee that, and that's all right. I don't expect you to understand. But DM me, get into my DMs, ask me about it. If I'm feeling extra generous that day, I might even look at your chart, but usually I make people pay for that. So, because it's just very time consuming. It takes a lot of time and effort and techniques to look at these things. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that that gives you just one more navigational buoy to get you on the course of more taking care of yourself, because that's what this is all about. All right. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you next time.